Good morning, students. This is our revision for the history chapter, the Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. Students, as we have so many times revised the syllabus, but as far as the main examination, I want to continue some important heading once again from the chapter. So, in the Russian Revolution and the socialism in Europe, there are so many incidents which are so significant and important. Among them, one of the most important topic is a turbulent time, and it is known as the revolution in 1905. Russia was an autocracy. Unlike the European ruler, even at the beginning of the 20th century, the Tsar was not subject to parliament. We know that in Russia there was not a parliamentary constitution and parliamentary government. And it was a time of 1905 that liberals in Russia campaigned to end this state of affairs. Together with the Social Democrats and the Socialist Revolutionary, they worked with peasants and workers during the revolution of 1905 to demand a constitution. So it means that when we say that how the 1905 year is known as a turbulent time in Russian history. So that's why that in this time the Democrats and the liberals gathered together with the peasants and the workers, and they demanded the parliamentary type of government in Russia, and they want that there should be a democratic constitution. They were supported in the empire by nationalists, and who supported them? They were also supported by the nationalists in Russia, and they were from Poland, for instance, and Muslim dominated areas by jihadists who wanted modernized Islam to lead their society. And they were also supported by the jihadists. Jihadists were the Muslim dominated areas, and the people who wanted that there should be a modernization according to the need of the society, although they follow the Islam. So, in this way, when we say the turbulent time of 1905 revolution in Russia, because we can see that not only the nationalist but the social democrats, revolutionary, then peasant, farmer, and the jihadist also supported this spirit of parliamentary constitution in Russia. Now we will continue the same, that the year 1904 was a particularly bad for Russian workers. Why it is bad for Russian workers? That it was bad for Russian workers that essential goods rose quickly, the real wages declined by 20%. Now that the membership of workers association rose dramatically when four members of the assembly of Russian workers, which had been formed in 1904, were dismissed at the Putilov iron workers. Then there was a call for industrial action. Over the next few years, for over so many workers in St. Petersburg went on strike, demanding that there should be a reduction in the working days to 8 hours, an increase in wages, and improvement in the working conditions. So we can see that everywhere in Russia there was exploitation of the poor people, either the factory workers or the, you can say, peasants and the farmers. So that's why they want to continue the demand of democratic regime in Russia. When the procession of workers led by the Father Gapon reached the Winter Palace, it was attacked by the police and the Cascades. Now, over 100 workers were killed and about 300 wounded. The incident known as a Bloody Sunday. It is important that what is the significance of Bloody Sunday and what is all about it. So started a series, and from this Bloody Sunday they started a series of events that became known as the 1905 revolution. Strikes took place all over the country and universities closed down. Now, when the students' bodies stacked walkouts complaining about the lack of civil liberties, lawyers, doctor, engineer, and the other middle class worker established the Union of Union and demanded a constituent assembly. During, now we will focus. So you can see that up to the 1905, what was the situation in Russia. Now during the 1905 revolution, the Tsar allowed the creation of elected consultative parliament or Duma. For a brief while during the revolution, there existed a large number of trade unions and the factory committees make up of factory worker. After 1905, the most committees and union workers for officially, since they were declared illegal, severe restrictions were placed on political activity. The Tsar dismissed the first Duma within 75 days and the re-elected second Duma within 3 months. He did not want any questioning of his authority or any reduction in his power. He changed the voting laws and packed the third Duma with conservative politicians. Liberals and revolutionaries were kept out. So in this way, this is all about the revolution of 1905 in Russia. Now, another important heading from this chapter as a revision purpose is the next is the civil war. What is the significance of civil war when we study the Russian Revolution and the rise of nationalism in Europe? That when the Bolshevik ordered and redistribution land distribution was held, the Russian army began to break up. Soldiers, mostly peasants, wished to go out to home for their redistribution and deserted. Non Bolshevik socialists, liberals, and the supporters of autocratic condemned the Bolshevik uprising. Their leader moved to the South Russia and organized troops to fight the Bolsheviks. They were known as the Reds. During the 1918 and 1919, the Greens, who were Greens, socialist revolutionary was known as Green, and the Whites, they were the pro-Tsarists, controlled most of the Russian Empire. These were the army, which has recognized with a different color name. They were backed by French, American, British, and Japanese troops. All those forces who were worried at the growth of the socialism in Russia, as these troops and the Bolsheviks fought a civil war, looting, banditti, and the famine became common. Now you can see that how the situation before starting the civil war in Russia. And now supporters of private property among whites took harsh steps with peasants who had seized land. Such actions led to the loss of popular support for the non-Bolsheviks. By January 1920, the Bolsheviks controlled most of the former Russian Empire. They succeeded to the cooperation with non-Russian nationalists and the Muslim jihadists. Cooperation did not work, and with where Russian colonists themselves turned Bolsheviks. In Khiva and the Central Asia, Bolshevik colonists brutally massacred and local nationalists in the name of defending socialism. In this situation, many were confused about what the Bolshevik government represented. Now, partly to remedy this, most non-Russian nationalists were given political autonomy in the Soviet Union, USSR, the state the Bolsheviks created from the Russian Empire in December 1922. But since this was combined with unpopular policies that the Bolsheviks forced the local government to follow, like the hard discouragement of nomadism, attempt to win over different nationalities were only partly successful. This is all about our civil war. What was the situation before starting the civil war in Russia? And then we will study we will revise once again another important content from the chapter Stalinism and Collectivization. Now, the period of the early panel planned economy were linked with to the disasters of collectivization of agriculture. By 1927 to 1928, the towns in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supply. The government fixed prices at which grain must be sold, but the peasant refused to sell their grain to government buyer at these prices. Now, Stalin, who headed the party after the death of Lenin, introduced firm emergency measures. He believed that rich peasants and traders in the countryside were holding stocks in the hope of higher prices. Now, speculation had to be stopped and supplies confiscated. In 1928, party members toured the grain producing areas, supervising enforced grain collections and raiding kulaks. Now, the name for well-to-do peasants. Who were kulaks? They were the well-to-do peasants. As shortage continued, the decision was taken to collectivize farms. It was argued that grain shortages were partly due to the small size of holding. After 1970, land had been given to the peasant. These small-sized peasant farms could not be modernized to develop modern farms and run them along industrial lines with the machinery. It was necessary to eliminate kulaks, they away land from peasants and establish state-controlled large farms. What followed was Stalin's collectivization program. From 1929, the party forced all peasants to cultivate in collective farms, and they were known kolkhozs. The bulk of land and implements were transferred to the ownership of collective farm. Peasants worked on the land, and the kolkhoz's profit was shared. Enraged peasants resisted the authority and destroyed their livestock. Between 1929 and 1931, the number of cattle fell by one third. Those who resisted collectivization were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled. As they resisted collectivization, peasants argued that they were not rich and they were not against socialism. They were merely did not want to work in a collective farms for a variety of reasons. Stalin's government allowed some independent collectivization but treated such cultivators unsympathetically. In spite of collectivization, production did not increase immediately. In fact, the bad harvest of 1930 to 1933 led to one of the most devastating famines in Soviet history when over 4 million died. Now, the students, one more important thing that when you revise the chapter, these important headings and these important new words very necessary to learn their definition because anything can be asked in the examination. Now it is all about the that Stalin's and the collectivization program. Now we will study. So in this manner you have to revise the chapter, not only that the questions you have to go through with the entire chapter, and in the middle of the chapter the question can be framed. So be very cautious that everything which is in your syllabus you have to read, revise and memorize. Now the another chapter, Nazism and the rise of Hitler. As we know that Nazism, that how the Nazi when we start this chapter, so it becomes very important that we study the years of depression. That in this chapter what years were known as years of depression, why they were called as a year of depression. The years between 1924 and 1928 saw some stability, yet this was built on sand. German investment and industrial recovery were totally dependent on the short-term loans, largely from the USA. This support was withdrawn when the Wall Street Exchange crashed in 1929. Fearing a fall in prices, people made frantic efforts to sell their share. On the single day, 24 October, 13 million shares were sold. This was the start of the Great Economic Depression. Over the next 3 years, between 1929 and 1932, the national income for the USA fell by half. Factories shut down, exports fell, farmers were badly hit, and speculators withdrew their money from the market. The effects of the recession in the US economy were felt worldwide. Now, the German economy was the worst hit by the economic crisis. By 1932, industrial production was reduced to 40% of the 1929 level. Workers lost their jobs or were paid reduced wages. The number of unemployed touched unprecedented 6 million. On the streets of Germany, you could see men with placards around their necks saying, willing to do any work. Unemployed youth played cards or simply sat at a street corner or desperately queued up at the local employment exchange. As jobs disappeared, the youth took to criminal activity and total disappear became commonplace. You can see that how the crime started in the European history. Now, the economic crisis created deep anxieties and fear in the people. The middle class, especially the salaried employees and pensioners, saw their saving diminish when the currency lost its value. Some businessmen, the self-employed and the retailers suffered as their business got ruined. These sections of society were filled with the fall of politicization an anxiety of being reduced the ranks of the working class, or worse still the unemployed. Only organized workers could manage to keep their heads above water, but unemployment weakened their bargaining power. Now, big business was in crisis. The large mass of peasantry was affected by a sharp fall in agriculture prices, and women unable to fill their children's and you can say stomach were filled with a sense of deep despair. So it is all about the years of depression, and it is 1929 to 1932 in the European history. Now these years were known as the years of depression. Politically too, the Weimar Republic was fragile. The Weimar Constitution had some inherent defects with which made it unstable and vulnerable to dictatorship. One was proportional and representation. This made achieving a majority by any one party a near impossible task, leading to a rule by coalition. Another defect was Article 48, which gave the president the power to impose emergency, suspend civil rights, and rule by decree. Within its short life, the Weimar Republic saw 20 different cabinets lasting on the average 239 days, and a liberal use of Article 48. Yet, the crisis could not be managed. People lost confidence in the democratic parliamentary system, which seemed to offer no solution. So, it is the years of depression from the chapter the rise Nazism and the rise of Hitler. So, you can go through all the important terms and headings. So student, today's homework is that you have to write down a short note on the years of depression in Nazi Germany, and you have to do the another question from the chapter that you have to write down short note on as a political opponent of the Nazi regime. So I am giving you two questions for today's homework. One, you have to write down a short note on as a political opponent of the Nazi Germany. You have to write down one page history as a political opponent of Nazi regime. And another question, you have to write down a short note on the economic depression, the years of depression in Nazi Germany. Till then, revise your syllabus, go through the entire chapters and learn the syllabus.